Sameach. So we've just received the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai. In fact, some members of our community got there before us a few hours ago, which is why I'm up here. Both of our rabbis have already received those commandments a few hours before us. And as David said, there's a lot to be said about the Ten Commandments. So we'll continue the conversation and hopefully build on what you said and not repeat too much. So I'd like to start by taking us back to that moment at Sinai to see if we can feel some of the power. If you're comfortable, close your eyes for a moment and imagine the mountain before you. Smoke rises from the top, curling into the sky, and the smell of burning incense and perhaps the smell of sulfur fill the air. Lightning flashes across the clouds, and a deep rumble of thunder shakes the ground beneath your feet. You feel the weight of what is about to happen. Words from God, spoken directly to us, calling us into the covenant that will last forever. Listen, these are the 10 commandments, the 10 utterances, meant not just for that time, but for us today. The mountain trembles. Every word carries weight. Every moment is unforgettable. According to the Midrash, it wasn't only those who were physically present at Sinai who experienced this moment. Every Jewish soul, past, present, and future, was there. We are there. Each of us, in some sense, stood at the mountain and accepted the Torah. We said, all that God said, we will do. Rise. In Hebrew, the 10 Commandments are called Aseret HaDivrot, the 10 statements, or the 10 sayings, or Aseret HaDvarim, the 10 words. And even though, out of convenience, many of us may say 10 Commandments, I think the word dibur, or word, or statement, or utterance, more conveys what the 10 Commandments were about. Saying the 10 Commandments might feel rigid and limited to 10 specific commandments, but the Hebrew terms utterance highlight that this was a communication, an invitation into our relationship with God. It also allows that more was included in the communication than just the 10 Commandments. Which raises the question of exactly what did we receive at Sinai today? Was it the 10 Commandments, or was it the entire Torah? The Talmud and the Midrash explore this in detail. According to one Talmudic discussion, the 10 utterances were spoken by God directly to the people, and the rest conveyed to Moses. Some rabbis say that just the first two, having no other gods and not making idols, were heard directly by everyone, and the rest was heard by Moses. Other sages say the entire Torah was given to us at Sinai in a broad sense, including all future interpretations of commandments. Part of the concern in this debate is not to consider the 10 Commandments as just 10 mitzvot, which are somehow more important than other mitzvot. And in fact, that may be why that even though the 10 Commandments have a central role, they're not part of our liturgy. We only hear them in Shul when they're read during the Torah, in Exodus, in Deuteronomy, and again on Shavuot. They used to be part of the liturgy at the time of the temple and were eventually taken out for the reason that they not be seen as 10 specific commandments. There's a midrash that brings this together by saying that the 10 Commandments, in fact, encompass the whole Torah. And how do you know this? Because if you count every letter of the verses of the 10 Commandments, there are 620 letters. That's 620. 613 for the 613 mitzvot. And now there are two interpretations about the other 7. One is that the other 7 correspond to the 7 days of creation. And another is that they correspond to 7 rabbinical commandments which came after the giving of the Torah. For example, the laws of Purim. That some of those laws were not in Torah, they're later in the Tanakh. But when we read the Torah today, the dramatic scene focused on the Ten Commandments. They're spoken aloud by God to all of us. So let's focus the rest of this discussion on the 10 utterances, 10 commandments, and how they speak to us today. The Talmud and the Midrash describe the tablets themselves. Tradition says they're made of stone, engraved directly by God. The letters were carved all the way through, visible on both sides. And some sources say they shone in a bright blue, reflecting the divine light of Sinai. We've lost those tablets, so we don't know. But I can imagine them shining brightly and retaining that light. In Jewish thought, the first 5 commandments are related to the relationship between God and humankind, while the last 5 concern relationships between people. I see the first as a group establishing God's sovereignty, acknowledging God, rejecting idols, and treating God's name with seriousness, not using God's name in vain. The next 2, about Shabbat and honoring our parents, are about holy behaviors. And it's interesting that Shabbat is the only one of the commandments that can be seen as specifically about Jewish law. And then the next 4 create a basis for civil society, prohibiting murder, adultery, theft, and false witness. And while on their face they're quite short, there are many interpretations of them and more discussion of them. For example, as David alluded to, that theft may be also read as kidnapping. Murder may be looked at as the way we may slowly take away the humanity of other people. And the final commandment, not coveting, is different because it addresses an inner tendency, not an outward act. But one understanding is that the prohibition of coveting recognizes that envy and desire can become the starting point for violating the 4 commandments that come before it. So now that we've all stood at Sinai and felt the power of God's words, I'd like us to bring this experience into our own lives by trying to truly receive them more fully and discussing them. So I have some handouts that Buzz is going to be giving us. And what I'd like to do is have people break off into groups of 2 or 3 and discuss these questions, and then we'll have some time for some feedback and people to share what's happened in your small groups. So the questions I'd like to look at are, which of the 10 commandments feels most relevant or meaningful to you right now, and why? Is there one commandment that challenges you but also inspires you in your life? If you were to choose 1 or 2 of the commandments to focus on for the coming year or coming period of time, what would it be, and how might you live it more fully? And what's your personal 11th commandment? If there's one more you could add to the 10, what would it be? So go ahead and move around a little bit, find 1 or 2 other people to talk to. We'll take maybe 5 minutes for people to talk in small groups. Thank you, everyone. We can, as we say, continue these conversations at Kiddush, but does anybody have anything they'd like to share from your group conversation? Anything that came up? Something about the 10 Commandments that speaks to you today, your personal 11th commandment, what you'd like to work on? Somebody? Some brave soul. Go ahead, David.
All right, so I was thinking about choosing commandment to focus on. It's also sort of 11th commandment. So do not covet, and that's more coveting my own goods, because as my wife and I are getting fairly close to retirement age and thinking about downsizing, we both have a lot of stuff, but I'm more guilty of having a lot of stuff. So I need to maybe not covet my own stuff so much.
Did everybody hear that, or should I repeat? You heard it? Okay, great. Anybody else? Al?
I just can't help. I must mention Mel Brooks.
Right.
I was walking down with 3 tablets.
Yep.
I've got these. And he drops one in there and he says, I've got these 10
course, that was exactly what I was thinking of. Not much of a joke teller. Max?
I was going to say that something to focus on in the coming year is number 9, do not bear false witness. Because I feel like there are a lot of alternate realities out there right now, a lot of truths that are not truth. So I think we all need to be focused on what is real and not what is just simply out there.
Thank you, absolutely. Anybody else? Yeah, I know one thing I've been thinking about is what it means, and especially since tomorrow's a Yisker Day, what it means to honor my father and mother now that they're gone. And that has to do with how I remember them and sort of the balance of some of the challenging things in my relationships with my parents with the many blessings and the many good things they gave me. So I've been thinking about how do I really honor them and not focus, maybe shift the balance a little bit more toward the positive. Thank you. So the Midrash teaches that all Jewish souls stood at Sinai. Shavuot is not only about remembering what happened long ago, it's about hearing the words again in our lives and making them meaningful in our time. Today we have the opportunity to re-receive the 10 Commandments. May they continue to guide, inspire, and challenge us throughout our lives. Chag Sameach.